Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now I apologise in advance for all the ARC B580 content. I mean that's all we've been focusing on this week, but it is the new mainstream choice, if you will, for gamers on a tighter budget. A very impressive card for the money, and it's nice to see the drivers are working well too. In today's one, I must admit I got this idea from Zworms Gaming. I saw a video where he was destroying a 4090 using various games. I think there was Left 4 Dead 2, and then I saw The Witcher 3 the other day, which was pretty funny, and I thought, why don't we apply that to the new Intel ARC B580 mainstream GPU? A 4090 it is not, but I thought it would be interesting to see how it handles a game like Cyberpunk when we turn the visuals way up. So we haven't done that yet. I'm actually using the RT Ultra preset. We have resolution scaling off and frame generation off, with basically everything left at default. I've turned film grain, chromatic aberration, all this stuff off because it's all a bit icky, in my opinion anyway, but it's up to you, and everything else has been left as it stands when you enable the RT Ultra preset. Of course, XeSS will enable by default, but we've got rid of that as well, and I just want to show you how the game runs with the RT Ultra preset and no upscaling, because I think it's pretty impressive. So here we are in Cyberpunk 2077. I've loaded a save downtown. We are getting plus 30 FPS at 1080p with the RT Ultra preset and all the extra effects like chromatic aberration and all that turned off. Nothing that really affects the frame rate from my experience. Now, as you can see, the game is utilising at least or almost at the moment 8 gigs of VRAM. Now it's at least 8 gigs of VRAM. What have I done to deserve this? I've just loaded the save game and now these guys are after me. What did I even do? Right, we're gonna draw the weapon. Let's get serious now. So yeah, look at that GPU VRAM assignment there, over 8 gigabytes, and in terms of actual utilisation, got 'em. For the game itself, we're seeing 7.6, upwards of 7.6, almost 8 gigabytes of VRAM anyway, and I think that considering the performance we're getting and the card we're using, everything is working pretty well. Now, of course, 30 FPS is not ideal for most people, and we haven't even begun to use the highest settings, of course, which involves path tracing, and whoopsie, I am so sorry. I don't know what I've done to deserve this, but we'll dispatch these guys before we switch to the highest in-game settings. I'll actually run a quick benchmark here just to see how this is performing in terms of the exact figures on screen, the percentile lows, and the average frame rates. I'm going to need to jump out of the vehicle and deal with these guys because they're getting on my nerves. I mean, it's still holding pretty steady even though we're in a pretty action-packed... Look what you've done to my van. Mate, you're going to pay for that. Right, I'm just going to take the coward's way out and run for my life here. I'm not even going to bother trying to... You thought I was running. But last minute I've turned the gun on you. I've got you. Let's disappear. Let's hide. We're still seeing between 35 and 40 FPS, sometimes even more, which I think is pretty impressive, and it's a good job we have 12 gigs of VRAM with this Intel ARC card. I think that's one of the best things about this GPU, aside from the price, when it's in stock, of course, because it can be quite hard to find. But yeah, doing pretty well, I think, considering. But it's time to turn things up a notch and truly destroy this GPU. We're going to stick... I don't want to get too close to those guys over there. I'm going to stick to 1080p. I think that's a wise idea, as you've seen thus far. But let's jump into the settings menu now. We'll go... Oh, yeah, I'll just confirm that. 1920 by 1080. Custom resolution scaling off, frame gen off for now. Ray trace lighting, we'll whack that up to psycho, and... Oh no, it might turn off in a minute if we apply path tracing. Yeah, all the other options disappear. Let's see. High. We'll turn the screen space reflections to psycho mode just to ensure that everything is turned up to its respective highest settings at 1080p. Upscaling still remains off, as does frame generation. Path tracing is now on. Path tracing in photo mode, we'll leave that off. We won't be taking any photos, but let's get back into the game and see. Okay, now this is a bit different. I don't know what's happened to this. Oh, it's a light going around the tree. I thought there was a slice of tree missing for some reason. Alright. So this isn't as bad as I thought. I mean, I wouldn't call this playable in any capacity, but yeah, we are dipping towards single digits now. Oh, that boosted us up a bit. If we play the game, right, like this, Look at that. 30 frames per second almost. It's a shame we can't play the entirety of the title like this because performance would be a lot more acceptable, but here we are just cruising through Night City. A little walking tour of Night City at plus 30 FPS with path tracing. Who'd have thought it runs on the B580 so smoothly, right? Back to reality, and yeah, we are having a little bit of trouble here. Let's jump into a vehicle. Wow, the keys are really weird. There's such an input delay. Like I'm sort of strafing left and right, and then V is moving about half a second after I've actually pressed the button, which is quite off-putting. Now, I'm not going to bother benchmarking this part, because as you can see, it's not playable. I don't think anyone would call this playable, and I've played with some pretty low-end hardware. I mean, I've pushed myself through 20-25 FPS in some games. I've put up with it for the sake of decent games before, but this is lower than what even I would consider playable, unfortunately. So we'll jump into... Oh, what? Mate. Right. Let's just get rid of him before we jump into the settings menu. Ah, there we go. Right. Now, back into the options. What we're going to need here, I think, is XeSS, super sampling 1.3. We're going to set that to quality. I think we'll target plus 30 FPS. I think that's a reasonable expectation. So we'll leave everything else as it is. XeSS set to quality. Jump back into the game and see if this can... Okay. Oh, all right. 30 frames per second. 29 frames per second. Yeah, to be honest, this feels a lot better to play. There is still a bit of input delay on the keys, it feels like, but we're still getting the full benefit of the path tracing effects, especially down there. That looks really cool down there. When we're on foot, the frame rate increases a little bit more. I mean, this looks really good. Sure, the image is a lot softer, especially when we enable upscaling. I'm playing on a high resolution monitor. I've just set it to 1080p by default, and I think it's looking a bit blurrier because of that as well. If you were playing on a native 1080p monitor to start with, it probably wouldn't look as blurry as you can see here, and it may not actually look that blurry through the YouTube video, although after compression and whatnot, it may do. Yeah, I'm pretty impressed with how this looks, and pretty happy with how it's running. As you can see, we are using over 8 gigs of VRAM now. That 12 gigs is really coming in handy. I say I'm happy with how it's running, and by that I mean considering the specifications. I mean, if you were to try and play the entirety of this game with this frame rate, it probably wouldn't be the most enjoyable experience. Look at those reflections, they look really good here. Let's just start a bit of trouble. Well, oh my, I didn't know he was going to fight back. Hello, sir. Well, I thought he was just going to run away, but now I'm in a whole heap of trouble. Yeah, things are starting to liven up around the market here, and of course the frame rate is really dropping. I wonder what it takes to get at least 30 frames per second though. If we go back into the settings, let's do balanced. Is that going to be enough? Not really. Things are still dropping. I mean, it's enough to maintain 30 FPS in some areas, but we're still seeing dips to the mid-20s there. We're going to have to face the facts, aren't we, and just go with performance mode. We'll enable frame gen in a minute. Intel XeSS 1.3 sets to performance mode with path tracing, and Cyberpunk 2077 set to the highest settings on the mainstream Intel ARC B580 is, I guess, sort of playable with plus 30 frames per second. The exact benchmark figures will be up on screen momentarily, but things are looking pretty good. What I will say is that performance doesn't look too much worse than quality. I thought there would be a huge difference. Remember, like with FSR1, where the difference between certain presets was quite significant? I thought that would be the case here, but in actuality, it doesn't look too bad. I always find this area looks pretty good as well with path tracing enabled. Something about these orange columns and trees surrounding this area, for whatever reason, looks pretty good. There's sort of a realistic lighting aspect to this whole zone here. I think it looks really nice. I'm probably just talking absolute rubbish, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with performance as well. I could certainly play this throughout its entirety if I wanted to play Cyberpunk 2077 with path tracing enabled and I was insistent on the extra visual effects. Okay, forget what I said, we've crashed. Okay, I guess I won't be playing the entirety of Cyberpunk 2077 with path tracing enabled and XeSS because the game has crashed. Yeah, not ideal. Okay, so we are back. What I'm going to do this time is turn the resolution scaling off once again. We'll just make sure it is off. Yeah, that looks to be off. The single digit FPS figure there pretty much confirm that. So we'll jump into the settings and we're going to enable frame gen this time, which of course enables FSR 3, set to performance, the sharpness is set to 50, frame gen is on. Okay, so quick recap of the settings. FSR 3 performance mode, the frame gen option enabled of course, path tracing on, everything set to its respective highest as we had it before. Basically, oh, we could change this to, no, I think we'll stick with performance, that's the best bet here. Still at 1080p resolution. Let's jump into the game. Right, plus 60 FPS, plus 60 generated frames, FPS anyway. It doesn't feel too bad. Sometimes there's a weird emotion-y, how can I explain it? There's a weird effect that looks like it's been artificially smoothed with some games. I think if you enable frame gen, if your frame rate's low to start with, you enable it. Sometimes it's like the effect that you get on some TVs where you can enable picture smoothing and it gives everything this sort of artificial feel, and it can make you feel a bit motion sick, or at least I do. I'm quite sensitive to motion sickness and stuff like that. Mate, your driving is absolutely horrible. I'm trying to explain something and you've just come crashing into me. But to be honest, this doesn't feel too horrible. I think it's the best way to describe it. In terms of how it looks, oh my, I am so sorry, sir. I'm so right, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to do that. In terms of how it looks, pretty shocking. I mean, we are driving through the once delightfully vibrant and sharp night city with what now looks like Vaseline smeared over our screen and some sort of 90s VHS filter as well. Things are pretty blurry, pretty pixelated. If you do want to make use of the path tracing and extra visual effects though, then you can enable it and see for yourselves. The thing is, the blurriness and pixelatedness sort of takes away from some of the extra graphical fidelity that you're going to experience with path tracing enabled. But in terms of the ARC B580 itself, working pretty well with Cyberpunk here, utilising not quite all the available VRAM, but if this was an 8GB card, I think it would be struggling a lot more. I'm pretty satisfied with how this is playing, not so much with how it's looking, but it's surprising to see, even when we weren't using these sort of extreme settings, just how well Cyberpunk runs on this mainstream GPU. Just to finalise, I'm going to change this to quality instead. So FSR3 frame gen quality, just to improve the picture. Alright, and we're still getting a sort of decent frame rate, around about 40 to 50 frames per second here. Not too bad at all. This actually feels pretty decent. I thought this would feel quite bad too. A little bit of an input delay. I don't think it matters as much in third person driving mode here. It doesn't feel too bad, but I am honestly surprised by this result as well. There's a weird sort of shadow tailing the car. It doesn't look like it's quite a real shadow. It's sort of a few feet behind the vehicle itself, which does look a bit strange. I can definitely tell there is a little bit of input delay. I move the mouse and then the crosshair moves in a short while after. But in terms of destroying the B580, well, I think it coped pretty well in today's scenarios. Well, we're just gonna, do I have any grenades? Oh, yes, there we go, take that. They're like the weakest grenades I've ever used in any game. Overall, the ARC B580 has held its own fairly well today. I don't think the car got destroyed by this game at all in the traditional sense. It held its own fairly... Oh, it jammed again. Oh no. Okay, that might be a problem, actually. We should keep that in there. I'm not going to cut that out because that might be problematic. If it's prone to do that, then that obviously is not ideal. I wasn't doing that with any other settings either. The 6253 drivers, Cyberpunk is crashing with path tracing, but to be honest, you're probably not going to be using path tracing realistically anyway. So this has probably gone unnoticed because not many people have enabled it with this card, but there we are. Anyway, this is probably going to be my last video before Christmas now, so wishing you all a Merry Christmas. Might see you before the new year. Merry Christmas, happy holidays and all that. Thanks for watching. Thanks for everything this year, your support, your viewership, and hopefully I'll see you all very soon.